Yet another prosecution for a social media post, which is likely to end up in a lengthy prison sentence, may leave you wondering what it is that you've posted online that may land you in prison. This is Lucy Connolly, wife of Conservative councillor Mr. Connolly, and who, for some background and context, describes her as an upset housewife, just a middle-aged mother who got dragged into this situation by spreading misinformation online. For further context, he explains that sadly their son died, so when she sees any child get harmed, she will kick off, he said. Now, this case was explained in further detail by the Crown Prosecution Service as follows, and says that she'd admitted inciting racial hatred after using social media, which involved a post about setting fire to hotels housing asylum seekers following the Southport incident with the 3 young children, which of course we know that contained false information, and that's obviously been circulated widely in the press. But this says having encountered false information online, which said that this was an asylum seeker. Obviously, we know that not to be true. She posted but then deleted a post which called for mass deportation, to set fire to hotels, etc. And she added, "If that makes me racist, so be it." Now, we can all hopefully agree that the post itself was wrong, and we shouldn't post those kind of things, and we can agree as to the nature of those. That isn't really the point here. What is the point is, at what point, generally speaking, does your opinion cross over a threshold that it might become criminal, particularly in the context of these riots and general civil disorder, which this was all caught up in. It says further down here, Frank Ferguson, who's head of the Crown Prosecution's Special Crime and Counter-Terrorism Unit, using threatening, abusive, insulting language to rile up racism online is unacceptable and breaking the law. So that's a point I'll come back to give you some general guidance about in just a moment. Goes on to say, during a police interview, Lucy Connolly stated that she had strong views on immigration, told officers that she did not like immigrants and claimed that children were not safe from them. He says it's not an offence to have strong or differing political views, but it is an offence to incite racial hatred. And that is what Connolly has admitted doing. The prosecution case included evidence which showed that racist tweets were sent out from her account in the weeks and months before the attacks, as well as in the days after. She wrongly thought that she could escape justice by hiding behind a screen. Today, she's pleaded guilty and admitted her crime. She will now face the consequences of her actions. And I understand that she's remanded into custody and she's going to be sentenced in due course. Now, obviously, this leaves a lot of people wondering, well, what is it that you can post? What is it you can say? Because, of course, this statement here is right. It is not an offence to have strong and differing political views on all of these things. But there is a threshold and a borderline that this crosses in which it becomes criminal, and therefore it's no longer just free speech, and you are not free to say what you wish under the law. Now, I don't say in my videos that I agree with every bit of law that I tell you about here. I'm not saying I agree or disagree. I'm telling you what the law is, and I'm explaining the guidelines of where those boundaries are. And for the avoidance of doubt, it's not to be taken as legal advice. But we look at the Public Order Act, Part 3, which is racial hatred, and this is stirring up racial hatred or using words or behaviour or written material, etc. Now, in this offence, racial hatred means hatred towards a group of persons defined by reference to colour, race or nationality, including citizenship, ethnic or national origins. And a person who uses threatening, and here's the key bit, a person that uses threatening, abusive or insulting words or behaviour or displays any written material which is threatening, abusive or insulting is guilty of an offence if they intend to stir up racial hatred or having regard to all of the circumstances that is likely. However, there is a caveat to that in that under sub 5, a person who is not shown to have intended to stir up racial hatred is not guilty of an offence under this section if he did not intend his words or behaviour or the written material to be and was not aware that it might be threatening, abusive or insulting. So there's a sort of a requirement within that part of the Act. But also, it leaves people to wonder, What is stirring up racial hatred? Is simply giving your opinion and saying your opinion online, does that amount to stirring up racial hatred? Well, as it usually is the case in law, it depends. Now, there's a document by the CPS which provides some guidance on how they deal with offences involving hate. Now, just pausing for a moment there, a lot of people say, well, what is a hate crime? Well, most crimes can be a hate crime if there's an element of hate to it. For example, it might be a racially aggravated attack. If there's a standard assault, which by itself would be just an assault, but if there was an element to it that is aggravated by a protected characteristic, for example, sexual orientation, or ethnic background, etc., then it can become a hate crime because it is aggravated by or motivated by one of those elements. So with that in mind, the CPS guidance document is how hate crime, what is it and how to look at it. So it says here, stirring up racial and religious hatred based on sexual orientation are offences under the Public Order Act. The offence of stirring up racial hatred under section 17 to 29 differs in legal elements, etc. But it says here, stirring up racial hatred is committed when someone says or does something, including posting material online, displaying a poster, performing a play, or broadcasting on the media, which is threatening, abusive, or insulting. And the person either intends to stir up racial hatred or makes it likely that racial hatred will be stirred up. But then again, people think, well, what is stirring up? What does that mean? Well, further down here, and I'll try to link this document if I remember, further down here, it says stirring up hatred means more than just causing hatred. It's not the same as stirring up tension. It must be a hatred that manifests itself in such a way that public order might be affected. The offences have been successfully prosecuted, go well beyond the voicing of an opinion or the causing of offence. So at first blush, you might think that is completely vague and unclear, but let's look at it again because there is a clarification in there. Stirring up hatred means more than just causing hatred. So if you say something that causes hatred, that's not the same thing. Now that by itself might be a bit vague. I get that. Even to lawyers, a lot of these things sound vague sometimes. And it's not the same as stirring up tension. So a lot of people you can cause tension by what you say between different groups, etc. That's still not stirring up hatred. It must be a hatred that manifests itself in such a way that public order might be affected. So, for example, using the context, generally speaking, of what we've had recently with civil disorder, if you make comments which stir up the hate such that public order might be affected, for example, specific reference to hotels or specific reference to locations and groups and gatherings, for example, a message that said, these people are there, go and get them, or everybody should go and get them, or I really hate them, therefore let's all go and get them, or they are in the hotels, as many of these cases have been, let's go to the hotels, let's go and attack the hotels. All of that is targeted and specific such that public order might be affected because they are calling directly upon a group, an area, a location, and effectively calling for something to happen such that public order might be affected. So it is stirring up hatred on a given set of characteristics in a way that public order might be affected. The offences that have been successfully prosecuted go well beyond the voicing of an opinion or the causing of offence. So if you were to be, this is general guidance, not advice, but if you were to be questioned about or furthermore charged with an offence of stirring up hatred and you believe that you were just voicing an opinion, now of course you would need to seek formal advice, etc., and avail yourself of all the advice that you can because you're entitled to that. But if you firmly believe that you were just voicing an opinion and you were not calling upon any effect of public order, you were not referring to specific places and things like that, then you need to discuss that with your lawyer. Because if you are merely discussing your opinions, voicing your views, then it is not the same as stirring up hatred to the effect that it would affect public order. And then finally it says, when considering whether or not to prosecute stirring up offences, there is a need to bear in mind that people have a right to freedom of speech. It is essential that in free, democratic and tolerant society, people are able to exchange views even when these may cause offence. That may run counter to what a lot of people have seen online with police talking, more than talking sometimes, to members of the public about what they're doing, what they're saying, the ideas that they're exchanging and so on. So maybe some of the police, with respect, need to brush up on this, because just having an exchange of views, even when they may cause offence, does not amount to these offences. Don't confuse the two. The issues involved in such cases are highly sensitive, and charges for stirring up hatred require the consent of the Attorney General in addition to the consent of the Crown Prosecution Service. So hopefully that is some general guidance. And so if you are voicing your opinions, don't feel that you are completely silenced. I know I've read online that a lot of people say that they are completely silenced and they can't say a thing for fear of prosecution. I get that. I understand that. But there is a line which you must cross for it to become criminal. And as I've mentioned in previous videos, you would have to really be inciting violence, in a call to action, telling people that there's a location, or go to a location, or everybody turn up, and things like that. And some of those comments you might recognize from some cases. You can apply a general understanding to things that you've read. Hopefully my channel here provides you an understanding of that. As I say, I don't, a lot of people say that I advocate the law. I advocate for people, not the law. I don't make the law. I certainly don't say the law is perfect and that I support the law wholeheartedly. The law has its flaws, and that's why every case must turn on its own facts. The CPS must look at each case on its own facts, even when it gets to court, and a judge will scrutinise the facts and the way that the law has been applied and so on. And then, of course, if it gets to a trial, that is then the job of the advocates. That is what we then do. The advocate for the Crown Prosecution Service will prosecute the case according to the facts and the law, and defence counsel will do precisely the same. But obviously from the perspective that their client either has a valid defence or should have strong mitigation, etc. So I hope that is some useful guidance. Please do subscribe to my channel if you like this as a fresh alternative to the mainstream media, which you probably won't get for the most part. You probably get some of the raw facts, which I don't think has this nuance of explanation to it. If you find that useful, then please do subscribe. And in the meantime, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.